Please would you welcome David Slight and Sean Lawson from the University of Lincoln.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's a two-hander, so it's me first and then Sean in a moment. Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity of talking to this forum. What an excellent idea to run this. What we'd like to do is to turn this into a discussion about, there we go, understanding Lincolnshire visitor perceptions and behaviour via analogue through to social media digital forms. The reason we're starting in the analogue sphere is we hope that it's a slightly more comfortable way into the topic. I have to declare an interest that I'm Lincoln born and bred, so therefore I have a complete and utter vested interest in the success of tourism in Lincolnshire. I want this county to be the best it can possibly be. Did 20 years in London for the BBC and then came back in the year 2000 when the university was getting started. So this really is something that I'm absolutely passionately committed to. Let's think about, therefore, the analogue landscape, if you like, within which visitors have always come to Lincoln and Lincolnshire and then move forward into the digital domain. And I'm utterly confident you're going to find some really fascinating stuff coming from Sean's research. If we go back, we've been thinking about going back centuries here in the 1200s. This is one of the earliest extant maps of the UK. The UK is there lying on its side, or rather lying on its back, facing east towards the top of the map, because of course that's where they believed Christ would rise from come the resurrection. And there, in more detail, only 4 places named on that map from the 1200s is Lincoln. So Lincoln was truly a really significant city back in the day. We know that the intervening centuries have not been kind, there's a quote from Daniel Defoe in 1724 saying, "Lincoln, that ancient, ragged, decayed, and still decaying city." Not exactly an ideal visitor proposition, is it? There's the tagline, "Lincoln was, London is, and York shall be." And some might say we're still in York shadow today. The graininess of that image is not to do with projection, it's to do with the fact that I photographed Lincoln Cathedral there from 18 miles away. It's another one of my little passions. But if we look at what academics would call ephemera, the aspects of paper and collectibles, and then try and look at them as a way of using them as a resource to understand things by, we could go to postcard collections, in fact, my postcard collection. So you get these multi-views. These are actually postcards from many different manufacturers over many different years. Notice the similarity of view, and this is quite a fascinating revelation. So it doesn't really matter where you go in terms of the views of the city. You can find these repetitive views over and over again. Quite interesting in terms of what visitors take away from us in terms of the postcards that they buy, the postcards they write, and the postcards they send to people. Just a little bit of a diversion here. Here's a postcard by Frith on the left. What do you do when a postcard's beginning to run out of its natural lifespan? So an old black and white photograph that they had, they colorized it. Fairly straightforward, has a bit more appeal on the postcard carousel in the shop. But what else did they do? They duplicated the boats on the Brayford. They duplicated the number of swans, so the boat appears twice, the swans appear twice, and they also enlarged the size of the cathedral. This is in the days before Photoshop, so quite fascinating artifice going on here. Another one of my favourites, what do you do with a photograph of the cathedral postcard when it's run out of its date? You actually turn it into an Art Deco postcard. But fascinatingly, that's 1916. So that's really early for the Art Deco movement. Quite a fascinating piece of artwork there. Just one quick other diversion. Our favourite, the Lincoln Imp. Well, would you believe, ladies and gentlemen, one of our key visitor calling cards is now no longer available. Simon Clark, the postmaster in the Vale, has told me he cannot get supplies of the Lincoln Imp postcard anymore. And if you have a look in Reddux, I had a quick look in Reddux on the way down, they don't have stocks of them either. We're missing an absolute trick. One other favourite postcard that I think we should resurrect for visitors is this one, which is called Legend Number 2. It's in a series of national legends from Edwards Limited in 1910, drawn by Edith Owen. Basically, this explains why Lincolnshire's roads have got so many twists and turns, so many bends, because a lady was setting out one day with a courtier, and basically every time she gave him a kiss, they turned direction, so the road turns direction. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you imagine the journey from Foldingworth to Market Raisin, that's a virtual orgy by the time they've got there. But what else can we do with postcards? Effectively, from the 1870s, when postcards get started, to the present day, they are analogue perspectives. They tell us something about people's experiences when they come to the city and to the county. They give us a sense of what people's preoccupations were. Yes, 84% of all postcards mention the weather. We know that. But going beyond that, there are all of the valuable bits of evidence around where did people travel to, from, etc. And here's a couple of examples, just picking up on one of the comments that Mary made earlier. This is a postcard in the late 1950s to Mrs. Ledden in Liverpool. Dear Mother, lunched at Buxton, tea at Lincoln, visited Lincoln Cathedral, off to Sandringham and Lowestoft. There you go. That's a visitor journey that we need to take account of and try and hold that person in the city for longer. How about this one in 1984 to Nancy Galloway in Edinburgh in Scotland. Super accommodation. Weather has been brilliant. Lincoln is as interesting as York. Yes. Saw a fly past of the Vulcan bombers, which are now being taken out of service today. So there you go. That's eyewitness testimony to history. We like that at the university. And then one final one, just to give you another amusing moment. To Mrs. and Miss J. O'Kell in Speak in Liverpool, dear Gran and Lil, having a good time. We went to a dance last night and the local girls got me to demonstrate the stomp. That's Ian. Ian had a fantastic holiday in Lincolnshire, obviously. But this is really important. This is about, you know, what value are these stories? What do they tell us? And what can we do with them? Well, through research and analysis, of course, we can do more. But are postcards still relevant today? I would say yes. And actually, here's one that's just been published very recently by Lincoln Big in honour of the 2012 award for Steep Hill. But where does this go from analogue form into digital? And on that note, I'll hand over to my colleague, Sean Lawson.
Thanks. Morning, everybody. Yes, so I'm going to talk a little bit about social media for the next 15 minutes or so. So I'm in computer science at the university, and my research area is trying to understand why and how people use social media. But this is my favourite quote at the minute about social media. So Twitter is just idiots and celebrities talking about what they had for breakfast. Is it true? Well, it kind of is true. So if we search right now on Twitter for hashtag breakfast, you will find people talking about what they've had for breakfast somewhere in the world. So not only do they talk about what they've had for breakfast, they post pictures of what they're having for breakfast, and they locate themselves on a map where they're having breakfast. So they're willing to kind of give us all this information for free. And if this isn't a postcard, I don't know what is. But this is my second favourite quote about social media at the minute. So the qualities that make things like Twitter, on the face of it, seem so kind of inane and pointless, are in fact what makes it so powerful. The fact that people are willing to self-disclose this information to each other and to researchers like me is amazing, because we get this previously kind of unavailable insight into what's actually going on right now in people's lives. Okay, so we all kind of think we know a little bit about social media. We've all used, hopefully, a few different social media platforms. So this is a well-known, humorous list of social media platforms. Twitter, I'm eating a donut. Facebook, I like donuts. Foursquare, location, this is where I'm eating a donut, and so on. But the problem for lots of people is how do you kind of harness these platforms for other purposes apart from people self-reporting what they're doing. So can we look at these platforms and design marketing strategies, for instance, around these platforms? So I'm not from marketing, that's not my background, I'm from computer science. So I know a little bit about what people are trying to do when they're trying to exploit social media for marketing purposes, but really my research is around the basic understanding of why people are doing this. If you say to someone, why did you just tweet that? They can't answer that question. And this is an open research question. No one can articulate themselves really the point of what it is that they're trying to do, a lot of the time at least. Okay, so there are lots of kind of interesting questions around social media. So for me that's really exciting because that's my research area. But it's kind of the one research area at the minute, at least in computer science, where the public use of these things has far outpaced the theoretical or academic understanding of these systems, which makes it interesting, but also quite challenging. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some pieces of work that we're involved with at the minute that kind of verge on looking at exploiting social media for marketing and tourism purposes. So, like many people, we're very interested in beer. So the craft beer industry in the UK has begun to exploit social media in very interesting ways. So this is a very kind of niche market. So companies like the people who make this beer here, other craft beer companies are available, have been using social media to engage with their consumers on a one-to-one basis. Okay, so they produce a new beer, they tell their customers about it through Twitter, and their customers give them feedback about what they think about their beer. Okay, so we get tweets like this from the Magic Rock Brewing Company, talking about some new beer that they're brewing. They ask their consumers what they're doing, and people will reply to that. And they talk about kind of other things that are going on their blog and so on. So they have a blog where they go to a particular pub which sells their own beer and take pictures of the customers drinking their beer and so on. Very interesting stuff, but they also talk about what they're doing in terms of their own kind of beer production. So we've just sent 10 pallets of beer to somewhere in Sweden. Quite run-of-the-mill stuff you would think, but from a kind of theoretical perspective, if you try and break down what's happening, there's these kind of various user groups involved in this kind of tweeting charade. So there's the actual companies themselves, there's the bars and the shops who sell their beer, then there's their consumers. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to reach these people and try and get these people to promote their products in order to reach these people over here. And that is often quite an easy thing to do because these people here are connected to these people, are connected to these people, and read the media and so on. So their strategy is to try and reach these purple guys over here. And it seems to work. But there's many of these craft brewing companies, and they also interact with each other. And by doing that, they can also increase their reach to these purple people over here as well. So a lot of my research involves trying to understand and graph these kinds of relationships. Okay, so it doesn't come out that well, but that's a kind of graph that we will produce to try and understand the social relationships around particular things that are going on. In fact, this is a graph around connections between people who are watching a TV program. So you get these thousands of connections between these nodes, these accounts on Twitter. And from plotting these graphs, you can work out who's important and where the bridges are between different sets of people. And you can also produce some very pretty pictures while you're doing that. So you might think, okay, this is kind of fairly run-of-the-mill stuff. We all use Twitter in our marketing strategies. And yes, for sure, people are doing this already. So this is the Lincoln Elf jingle, which is talking about the upcoming Christmas market. Jingle appears to have kind of gone AWOL since the 12th of October, but pretty busy doing stuff, I'd imagine, in preparation for Christmas. So this kind of thing is happening already in Lincolnshire. What we've talked a lot about already this morning in the previous talks, Andy David's talk, is about location, place. Okay, so this is a very integral part of social media. People like reporting where they are. So I'm having breakfast at McDonald's at Brayford Pool. Why do people tweet that or use Foursquare to do that? It's an open question, but people seem to want to do it. So this is my Foursquare account. So yesterday I would have kind of checked into my workplace. You think, well, why did you do that? I don't know. It's because everybody else seems to. So when I do that, though, I get kind of recommendations about what's around me. So this is one kind of social media platform that people have kind of exploited quite a lot for marketing and tourism purposes. Okay, so if we think about the Lincoln and Lincolnshire and Foursquare, Lincolnshire is a bit of a desert for Foursquare check-in locations. So this is the postcode for this particular building here. This is some third-party service which just lists the first 20 locations on Foursquare that it finds around that location. So if we were in central London, it wouldn't be over a space of about a kilometre. The first 20 locations will be in a space of about 20 yards. Okay, but in Lincoln, these check-in locations are quite spread out. If you look in my village, I live in Bardney, so that's the postcode for Bardney. You have to go a long way, to find some check-in locations, around Bardney. So there's not a lot of activity in Lincolnshire around Foursquare at the minute. You think, well, that's a bit unfair. Bardney's out in the countryside. There's not many places that people might check in. But even if you look, in the centre of town, at the top of the hill, there's still not a lot of places for people to check into on Foursquare. There are lots of good examples, though, around the world of people exploiting Foursquare for marketing purposes and for tourism purposes. So this is a restaurant in the States who have had one of the most aggressive social marketing campaigns kind of in history, a lot of it based on location on Foursquare. So they don't do anything kind of that exciting. They just offer deals for people checking in and deals for people who check in regularly. But they do kind of some wacky things like trying to get flash mob check-ins, trying to get over 100 people checking in at the restaurant at the same time. And this kind of results in, well, they've shown that it actually results in significant increases in their turnover. Technology is never going to catch on, is it? More wackier stuff, more wacky uses of Foursquare. So this is a German dog food manufacturer. We thought it'd be a good idea to put up these billboards around Munich. And when someone checked in on Foursquare, to this billboard, this dispensing thing down here underneath the billboard actually gave their dog some dog food. So this is kind of, you think, well, this is just insane. Who would do such a thing? It costs a fortune. It's quite difficult to set up. But again, they actually saw quite significant increases in their business activity. It's quite a kind of mad thing, this, but people like mixing the physical and digital. So Regent Tweet is an event that's held on Regent Street in London every year and organised by a media company sister who we work with on their social media campaigns. All this text is meant to be over here. But the idea is that they invite bloggers and big social media users to Regent Street for the day. And they get packs of cards, physical items, and they can go around the shops and exchange those physical items for real products. But the idea is that these people then, because they're very active bloggers and big users of social media, they have a big reach into the community. So by getting these people along to Regent Street and tweeting about it, their experience, and then going away afterwards and writing blog posts about it and using other social media platforms to talk about it, that promotes Regent Street to a very big market. So can we do the similar kind of thing, for instance, in Lincoln with things like the Christmas market? But one of the things that some of those bloggers went away and did, and this is kind of bringing us right up to date this, is they went away and they created Pinterest pages about their experience on Regent Street this year. So Pinterest is kind of the new kid on the block in terms of social media platforms. Just when we thought kind of all the obvious ideas were done, along comes Pinterest, which is just a site which allows people to curate their own collections of digital images that they've found on the web. So you get this kind of very pretty kind of rendering of these images and a nice kind of web-based platform. So these are images from this social media campaign on Regent Street. So you think, well, this is a really good way to promote, location and places in Lincolnshire, for instance. But there's no official, I don't think, Lincolnshire Pinterest site as yet. But if you do type in Lincolnshire into Pinterest, then you get this gorgeous set of images around Lincoln. Images that no one person could, even with a kind of really deep understanding of the culture and the heritage and the tourism sites of Lincolnshire, could go away and curate on their own. So unfortunately, we don't have an internet connection, but down here, this goes on forever. This fantastic kind of rendering of all these images. Okay, so we're actually probably going to finish on time, amazingly. So we're giving you kind of a breakneck speed run through of just a couple of the things that we're interested in at the university. So David's talked about how we can look at analogue representations of place and space in Lincolnshire and get an appreciation of what people want us to talk about through analogue postcards, for instance. And my research is about why do people want to talk about the same things through social media? Why do people want to use Foursquare to check into their locations? Why do people want to tweet about their breakfast even? And how can we look at these human behaviours and think about how we can use them creatively to promote products or places and spaces like Lincolnshire?